Right now with capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number? Or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know, Zach.
It's a tough one. I
It's
know.
really hard.
And maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight, we're having a pretty loose and relaxed night of kind of whatever videos we feel like reacting to and whatever videos you guys would like to see us react to. Joining me is the lovely Amanda. How you doing tonight? Here, I'll move the camera so you're
okay.
more in frame. Oh.
No.
No, you don't want to be in frame?
No.
You just want to be a disembodied voice from the side?
I want to be a voice without a face. Good
Okay.
enough for Billy Idol. It's good enough for me.
So, before we get into the videos, though, there was a story that you wanted to tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take it away.
It's not a happy story. It's just more of a reflection of the state of the universe right now.
State of America, specifically.
Right. Well, whatever. America is the universe by most people's standards.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I work in education still. Now I work with adults. Part of our work day...
Vulnerable adults, you should say, too.
Adults on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And we go out into the community and volunteer at places. And one of the places we volunteer at is a kitchen for homeless people. So it involves a lot of food prep, specifically cutting things with knives. And I usually have about 3 or 4 students with me at that time. And we're cutting some kind of like... With that situation, you kind of get what you get food-wise. So we get a lot of imperfect produce, if you will. We were working through some carrots. And the student was gloved, had done everything he was supposed to do, accidentally cut the side of his finger. And we followed the standard...
Sorry?
It's really distracting.
It was literally a quarter second of audio. I'm sorry that went in your ear. Continue, please.
Can you put it back on the right screen? Sorry. So, this student had nicked his finger. We were adding paper towels and we washed it. It was bleeding. We were adding more paper towels, compression. The student had his hands up over his head. I started a timer because I was like, gosh, this is really taking a long time to stop bleeding. I hit the 10-minute mark. I notified my boss. I followed with calling 911. 911 was like, yeah, that's a long time to be bleeding from a small cut. We're going to send someone out. We're going to send out the fire department. And I was like, he cut himself. He's bleeding. Why are you sending me the fire department? I need an ambulance. I need a medic.
Kind of weird.
And they're like, oh, it's just a protocol, whatever. It's very dismissive. I was like, all right, fine. And like, the student's responsive. He's upright. He's not going to fall over anything. So the student and I went outside. Little background for the audience. The student is not white. Student is very dark in complexion. Student, and this neighborhood that this particular kitchen in is, it's North Minneapolis, and it's not technically a great area. It was definitely not a neighborhood I'd go hang out by myself at 2 o'clock in the morning, but during the day it's fine. So anyway, this student of mine and I were outside. Student has his hands above his head because he cut his finger, and that's what you're supposed to do.
Elevate, yeah.
Yeah, you elevate, right? We had added more paper towels. There was blood on the ground from like where we had come out of the building to where we were standing. Finally, after about another 5 minutes, so now this has been 20 minutes of the student bleeding with continuous pressure, and we're adding paper towels every time, right? The fire department shows up. And I'm just gonna rip off the Band-Aid and throw my biases out there. The Thumb Patrol shows up.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. And all three of them are shorter than me. So they're already feeling some sort
Well,
of
wait,
way.
they weren't actually the fire department, though, were they?
No, they were cops because
Yeah.
they had belts with accessories, and all three of them came over, hands on their hips, and my student, like, kind of backs off a little bit. I explain what happened. It was like, he got cut. He's been bleeding for 20 minutes now without even looking at him. Not even, like, seeing that the paper towels are soaked through with blood and there's blood on the ground. They say, he's fine. It's like, you're not even going to look? They're like, he's fine.
Wow.
And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? What part of, like, he's been bleeding for 20 minutes. He's soaking through the paper towels that he's holding now. And you're telling me he's fine. He's not fine. Like, I was just...
Yeah, I would be livid at that point.
There was no medic that ever showed up. I went back in. I had other students, too, at this point. And I'm like, okay, guys, we're going back to school because I'm going to go hook you up with the school nurse. Because I know she's going to fucking do something. I'm not dealing with this anymore. So I got on the phone with the nurse and I said, hey, Allie, I'm coming back from Minneapolis. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I need you to meet me at the door. I've already tried to do the right thing and it didn't work. And got him back to school. She applied. So this is 20 minutes of bleeding had happened before the thumbs came. 20 more minutes of bleeding in driving back to school. And 20 more minutes of bleeding at school. He needed stitches.
Yeah. Oh, that's just awful.
It was like, James, I almost thought that. I thought they were going to try and pat him down. It was just like, you touch that kid, so help me God. I'm taller than two of you stacked on top of each other. I will let you have it.
Well, you told me they started approaching him, right?
Yeah.
And you basically told them to back off, like...
Yeah. I was like, move away.
Yeah.
I like put my hand up and was like, I got it from here because you're not going to do anything. Don't touch
It's
him.
just so ridiculous.
Like, just what a gross system and a gross situation. Like, you just looked at this kid, right? You just... And, like, I didn't say anything about the Spectrum-y stuff on the phone because I didn't want to make it worse because I already felt bad enough about having to call and about who I thought was going to show up and then who I thought would show up did.
Yeah.
And it was bad.
Yeah, it seems like they were looking for someone to victimize at that point. They heard North Minneapolis. Maybe they even work in North Minneapolis, but they heard that neighborhood. And, they rallied the boys in the hopes that, if blood's involved, they can crack some skulls and have some pretext to rough people up and all that sort of thing. It's disgusting. So James says, I'm not trying to get a riot started, but if he's dark complected, it's going to be time for them to get the dogs out and not bandits. Yeah.
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 Well,
Who knows how it could have escalated had Amanda not stepped in and
I don't really feel like I helped the situation that much.
Oh, I think you
besides
really
getting
did.
him out of there.
Because what most people do when authority figures, especially if it's cops, step in is they just assume that authority figure knows what's right, and they just let them take over, even if it's for the worse for everybody. But since you were assertive and you showed that you weren't going to allow him to be victimized, then
I wasn't
I
letting
think
him
Yeah, you did the right thing.
I was not going to let him
But
get
you
in
showed
any
them that it
vehicle
was-
with them without me.
Right,
He wasn't going anywhere without me. So if I couldn't come, he wasn't going.
Right. And to be honest, it probably helped that you were a white woman. They probably didn't want to have to explain why they roughed up a caretaker of a autistic kid for no good reason, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the state of the world we live in. Cannot trust the cops, and apparently you can't even trust calling the EMTs because the cops might just show up anyway. But you said they were in a fire vehicle, but it ended up being cops. I don't know. That sounds really shady.
I don't know. They had weaponry, like they had belts. They
have
walked
guns?
out. It looked like a gun.
Yeah, I guess you're probably not scanning that closely in the heat of the moment, but yeah, right, absolutely, you know, and I mean, if you think about it, Elijah McClain, yeah, that's right. I thought it was that name. He got murdered for much less, you know, walking home with a ski mask on because his face was cold.
Anemic.
Because his face was cold, and it's like the winter time, so like probably not the only person in all of.
He was like unseasonably dressed, which is why they went after him in the first place, and then it just escalated.
Still, for wearing clothing.
I'm not excusing it.
Wearing clothing that he explained right away.
Right, he's
regardless.
like, I'm anemic. Like.
Did not resist. Didn't do anything, and ended up being given a lethal dose of ketamine, I believe. So it could have been a similar story here. Especially if like they had approached him and the student had gotten scared or something and reacted somehow, that could have been bad. But the idea that it's more preferable to drive 20 minutes across town and have other people who actually care for him, take care of him, that just shows how broken the system is, really.
Mm-hmm. Like, again, it's like, did they just not have a conversation? They just sent someone without any explanation of like,
oh, I'm sure.
Hey, this is a prep kitchen and someone got cut. Like, if I were the one taking that call and going out, I'd be like, oh, I need to bring like a first aid kit and maybe some liquid sutures or things like that.
You would think they would have all that just on the truck, and like to not even take a look at him up close, like, god damn, man.
I know, they just completely dismissed him.
What are you even for?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was so outraged when I got back. I dropped all of the kids off at the door and I just bawled. I just sat in the truck and cried for like 20 minutes because I was so angry.
Yeah.
Like,
it's totally understandable.
And then these are the people that were supposed to be like, oh yeah, they protect us, they serve us. No, they don't. Only if you're white. And even then, did they, like, so just a little spin off of this, the coworker that like helped me recenter myself before I could get back to work was talking about her, a relative of hers that had, was not the best dressed man, but he was a diabetic, and he wore a tag stating he had diabetes while he had dropped to the ground and was in diabetic shock because he looked like he was homeless and out of control. Instead of looking for the medical tag, hogtied him to a gurney and threw him in the back of the truck.
Jeez.
Instead of assessing the situation and going, oh shit, their blood sugar's out of control. We need to stabilize them.
Yep, that's exactly right, James. They respond to a call with who do we have to beat up already in
Right.
mind. Yep, that was clearly the mentality they were going into it with, because, yeah,
Right.
they dropped that pretense of helping immediately. So, yeah.
Well, it's
Barbaric.
It's so
Cruel.
hurtful and insensitive and like you don't have to beat anybody up. And also, if you're supposed to be responding to a medical call,
I think you might do some medical treatment, yeah.
you should probably be anticipating some medical things, not
Right.
you might be taking someone to the hospital or Like, gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So now your work has new protocols, right, about calling the police?
Yeah, we're not calling anymore.
Not calling 911 anymore because, yeah, it's too risky, especially when you're dealing with the students of color.
Like, someone might get hurt, but my work was so nice because they were like, we're going after the department. You don't treat people that way. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we're filing a complaint.
That's surprising to see. You don't often see that. Most institutions will, again, just roll over to power and come up with reasons why, they probably were in the right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really refreshing. Yeah, good to see. Cool organization.
Makes me happy.
Which I'm probably going to be working with at least part-time as well. So I'm going to be doing the snow removal with my landscaping job, and then on days when it doesn't snow, I'll be working with Amanda's work. So that'll be good.
Whoop, whoop.
I got the chance to go meet the kids, and just, some of the sweetest people, the ones that I got to meet. I'll probably be doing a lot of transportation for them since I have a lot of experience. I did transportation for people with a very wide range of disabilities for about 3 years. So I'm used to 15-passenger vans and dealing with incidents that happen. But I don't even anticipate anything as major happening with this one. But yeah, so it's cool. Yeah, it basically is my new boss, especially if she gets promoted.
I'm not the boss.
Yeah, she's the boss.
I'm the boss of myself, and I'm the boss of the kids that I take out when I take them out.
I'm like, yes, Miss Amanda. Yes, Miss Amanda. I'm just kidding.
I'm not going to be that kind of a boss.
No, you're not going to be like your one coworker.
No.
Just take over because you've been there longer.
No.
Anyway, let's move on. So we have housing news. Didn't end up getting qualified for the loan after all of that bullshit. After boss man, there you go. Anyway, so after being told from the beginning from this mortgage lender, just fix these couple things on your credit report and you'll be good to go, get you in qualifying range, no problem, just do these things, which we did immediately. And after being told time and time again, we're on a good track, just as soon as you find a place, we'll nail everything down for certain, and so on and so forth. Finally getting a place, getting an offer accepted, going through the process of getting it inspected, which costs money. It was like nearly $900 for that. After going through all that, all of a sudden the lender comes back and says, "Oh, looks like your debt to income ratio is a little bit out of whack." And this was the first we'd heard that was even a metric that they were looking at, because let's just say that the guy that we were working with was not exactly communicative.
Weasel.
Yeah. So, like, the only thing he ever talked to us about was our credit report, like our credit score, our credit report. These are the things that make the big difference. But apparently, secret metric, debt to income ratio. And so he's like, and so instead of that 3.5% down that we've been talking about, it's going to be 10% down, which brought it from about $8,000 cash to close to, first he said $16,000, so double, and it ended up being when they made their final offer to us, it was going to end up being just under $20,000 to close, and we just couldn't put that together. So we said thank you, but no thank you. And we ended up having to walk away, unfortunately. But at least we'll get our earnest money back, because we put earnest money down on the house. We will get that back. They legally have to.
If it doesn't,
because we could not get financing.
If it doesn't,
yeah, that's going to be a shit show if it does not go the way that it's supposed to. But anyway, so we're still going to move, though. We're totally sick of this apartment complex, mostly with the management, who refuses to do even basic maintenance anymore. They just have stopped cleaning the hallways, cleaning up the parking lots.
Oh no, that's because they wanted us to do it.
Yeah, they were trying to get someone from the complex to do like 3 hours of work a day, or it was hour and a half maybe.
I don't care. It was
Anyway,
more work than I
it was a
care
lot
to
of
do.
work, and they would give you like, I don't know, $500-$600 off in your rent, but it ended up being like it would be because it'd be 7 days a week. It would have ended up being basically a part-time job, and they're going to give you the equivalent of $700 a month. So, surprise, surprise, no one took that offer, and it has just gotten worse and worse from there. So, it's time for us to leave. Sick of our packages being stolen. Sick of all this stuff. But we found some really great places. We're going to end up, we're paying under market rate right now for our rent. We're just going to pay the nationwide average. We found plenty of places for about $1,200 that have some fabulous amenities, actually. The one that we're applying for first, that we'll probably get into, has like, indoor pool, a weight room, a large deck for like socializing and stuff. They have a movie room you can rent out, and it's about the same square footage. It's a pretty tall building. It's like 28 stories, and we'll be pretty high up there. But it just all seems pretty great. And they have a package locker too. So looking forward to never getting a package stolen again. That'll be good too. So still onwards and upwards.
And secret underground parking.
Oh, that's right. They have controlled access to the parking ramp. They have 5 subfloors of parking apparently, but that's good because there's like 400 units in the building. So
That makes me worry if there'd actually be enough.
I don't think they would. I think if they're going to promise us a stall, which they have, that they can't have more units than spots. So I think it's going to work out just fine. So that's good. Thanks, Wolf Skeptic. Thanks a lot. Yeah, West Virginia. You could be a mountain mama, Amanda. West Virginia. Mountain. Okay, fine. Amanda says no. Sorry, James. I tried. We're doing okay, Wolf Skeptic. How are you? We're just talking about. So we were trying to get a home to catch you back up here. We were trying to get a home, and the 3.5% down that they had promised us from the beginning, suddenly after we'd gone through the home inspection, putting in an offer, getting accepted, putting our earnest money down, completely. All this stuff. The lender comes back and says, "Oh, just kidding. Instead of 3.5%, it's going to be 10% down," which would have made it just under $20,000 by the time it was done. And we just couldn't put it together, so we had to walk away, unfortunately. But the good news is we found some great apartments that are within our budget, so we're going to get something. Going to be moving to fabulous downtown St. Paul.
Hopefully.
Our
friends sounds like they had a bad weekend.
Oh, the weekend was a bit of a struggle for you? I'm sorry to hear that.
What was going on? If you don't want to share, you don't have to. But
yeah, since you brought it up. Couldn't get a duplex? No. We were just looking for regular apartments right now.
Something cute.
A house would be fine, but we're finding so much stuff that has tons of amenities that you wouldn't really get in a duplex that we're going to lean towards that. Especially since in a rental house, there's only so much you're allowed to do with the yard, which was a big reason that I wanted to get a detached single-family house to buy, because I'm a landscaper and I like working with the land, escaping it and whatnot. So that's that.
James, I'd make an awful hillbilly, to be honest.
So tonight we're just going to look at some random videos. If you guys have any suggestions of stuff you want to look at. Oh, family members. Mini snowstorm. Whoa.
Ooh.
Yeah, that sucks. Well, good luck to you, man. Hang in there.
I hate family stuff. It's really stressful.
I'm sure that's true, James, and that's great. But we can't really leave the state right now. we're kind of tied here because my kids live here. So at least until they're grown, we'll be hanging around Minnesota.
Then we'll be moving to Canada.
Yeah, that may be so. Canada does look pretty good because it seems like we're just never going to get universal health care. People are too ignorant and propagandized.
I don't want to have to support anyone else. Like, do you realize that you're supporting yourself too? Like,
yeah,
it's
actually,
guaranteed there for you as well.
right. Yeah, well, they don't think about it. All they hear is, "Oh, government's gonna have control," and then their brain just shuts down. Because it's so much better for a large company like Kaiser Permanente or what we have in Minnesota, Alina, or these other large companies. So much better for them to control what healthcare you get, or whatever company that you work for. Your big corporation probably cares a great deal about you personally, so I can see why you'd want to keep that.
Well, I mean, like,
It's just so ridiculous.
My work insurance is going up 15% right now, just because, even though, like, insurance companies' profits went up last year, like, record amounts. So I don't understand why I have to pay more now because your profit margins are through the roof.
Yeah.
And
It's the great scam that's happening in every industry right now, and just blame it on, gas and oil, blame it on Russia, blame it on anybody you can blame it on, except for the thieving, greedy, corporate bastards who own and control everything.
Right. Like, I had to fight with my insurance. Overshare
God.
moment.
No, please.
I fall under a category called glaucoma suspect.
Mm-hmm.
But through my ophthalmologist and the testing that he's done so far has said that, like, my optic nerve is still really good and intact, and I had an option to start eye drops to lower the pressure in my eyes to preserve my vision. It's not mandatory. He said it's just a choice for you. So I was like, well, fuck yes, please. Like, of course I want the eye drops. And then my insurance was like, well, you're not. And it was like, no, you're paying for it. I need these eye drops.
This
because
is
I'm not
a medical
surgery
necessity
candidate. So I need the damn drops. So can you just fucking give them to me, please?
Right. Yeah, surgery would be really hard on you.
So then, my ophthalmologist called and he's just like, it's medically necessary. And they went ahead. But still, it was just like...
It was a fucking fight, though.
Yeah, it wasn't just a simple yes. I had to, like, prove myself in need. Because I guess... And it also doesn't help that this medication is something that, like, women will go and get for, cosmetic purposes. Sorry. Because apparently it makes your eyelashes really long and full.
And turn brown, potentially.
Your irises may turn brown.
Yeah.
So
I know you're looking forward to that possibility.
I don't think it's bad.
I know. I mean that. You are looking forward to that because you,
for
some reason, don't like your pretty green eyes.
Well, they're probably going to stay green. He said it wouldn't change, but my eyelashes will get fuller.
You know, snuffleupagus in the house.
Yeah.
You'd be able to hear the
yeah.
You definitely have to put the pop filter in front of your eyes.
ASMR.
Yeah. Oh, God. Eyelash ASMR.
Yes.
Gross.
Whatever. You're going to be the hottest channel.
I don't want to get famous for ASMR. That's okay. Wolf, you mentioned us moving to Vancouver. That actually is our top city in terms of moving to Canada. Because it's a good climate for both of us. Because I hate the extreme cold, and she hates the extreme heat. So, like, what's better climate than Vancouver, Pacific Northwest? You know, always between 40 and 60, maybe 75. I can bear that.
I'm a 75 and sunny kind of gal.
I didn't even realize that's where you're from, Wolf. I must have forgotten that, but that's cool. So, yeah. Seems like a cool place. Famous future hillbilly theory. Anyway, how's about we watch a video?
I suppose.
So there's one from Ben Carrillo, or I think it's Carrillo. I think that's how they pronounce it.
I think you need to roll it more.
No, but they don't pronounce it in like the Hispanic way. Because it could be Carrillo, but I don't believe they do. Ben's pronouns are she, her. So that's up there right away.
Excellent.
And this is, can you have a blend of socialism and capitalism? It's something that a lot of like Dem socks talk about, how, oh, we'll just get rid of the worst excesses of capitalism, decommodify stuff. It sounds to me like a good stepping stone, but we'll see what Ben says about it. She is pretty knowledgeable about theory and stuff, so I always appreciate her takes.
It's it. Yeah, well, I mean, Red Wizard, a lot of people put out misinformation about socialism, right? And a lot of people miseducate people at socialism.
No close
give me a one in chat if you've ever heard anybody say we need a blend of socialism and capitalism. Give me a one in chat if you've ever heard anybody say that we should have a blend of socialism and capitalism. We've all heard it. Is it possible to have a blend of socialism and capitalism? Yeah, no, it's not possible. It's not possible. You cannot have a blend of socialism and capitalism, right? It's fundamentally impossible. You either have a dictatorship of the proletariat or a dictatorship of capital, right? Because what a dictatorship of capital means is that your government, however democratic it pretends to be, is designed in such a way that it will always reflect the will of the wealthiest people, right? That it will always reflect the will of capital, right? When you have a socialist system, it is designed in such a way that it will always reflect the will of working class people, right? That it will actively suppress capitalist exploitation to the benefit of the working class. Fundamentally, a socialist state has an inherently adversarial position towards capital. By definition, right? Now, with that said,
So yeah, I can agree where Ben's coming from here, that the way that our system is set up, it has capital and capitalism baked into it. It's defense of property rights. It's the pursuit of life, liberty, and property, as it is written in the Constitution. So it would be very difficult to have a true socialist system. Now, you could have a system where cooperatives, worker-owned and directed cooperatives are the norm, but as long as you're allowing some capitalism to remain, the state is kind of tuned to reinforce that, to hold that up. So I can see where she's coming from here. On the other hand, I don't know. To say that a system has to be all one thing or all another. I mean, we have elements of feudalism still in this capitalist state. We have elements of slavery still in this capitalist state. Not officially, or at least not directly. You could call debt peonage a form of slavery, but with like landlording and mostly landlording. There's a reason it's called landlording. It's because it is a vestige of feudalism, where money was made by owning land and taking a portion of what was produced on it. Now, in this case, it's a portion of the money that the people make who live on it, more so than directly crops or that sort of thing. But that's just a different form of currency rather than a different system entirely. But we have vestiges of that left over. We have vestiges of aristocracy left over, where families just control things politically because they've been around and built up a political machine for quite some time. So I guess the question really becomes, is it useful to think of things in all or none sort of scenarios, where either you have a completely socialist state where the workers directly control the means of production or control it through their direct control of the state, or you have a capitalist system with a capitalist set up by a capitalist state and reinforced by it. What are your? I've been talking a lot. What are your thoughts so far, Amanda?
I hate capitalism
Mm-hmm.
a lot. I thought at one point I fell under the social democratic thing, but it just doesn't push it far enough. The rich guy, poor guy, white guy, black guy system. Yeah, it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah,
Like if we
class
ever
divisions.
hope to.
Right.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry, you were just talking.
I'm just interjecting a couple.
I feel
Right.
like if the system were to ever truly evolve, like, wouldn't destroying capitalism actually bring us equity as a society?
Yeah.
Because everybody would
It would be
have
shared.
access to all the things all the time.
Mhm.
It wouldn't be these stipulations or these if-thens or, these hoops and hurdles to go through.
Yeah, I come from a similar angle as well, Wolf. I too, I would call myself an anarcho-communist, or perhaps a libertarian municipalist, if you really want to get technical about it. But I believe in socialism from the ground up as well, that it comes best from just starting to do it, behaving in that way, building networks of mutual aid amongst your own community that then you can use to rival the power of the government by first and foremost not being dependent on local government or more importantly local businesses, local capitalist interests. So I would definitely agree with that part too. Cannot create, so you say that it can't be, the state cannot create socialism. It has to be grassroots from the ground up. Workers themselves in the states could see that as a threat. Oh, they absolutely would. In no matter what the case, socialism coming to town is going to be seen as a threat by the capitalist class or the owner class, and it definitely would be. They would not be wrong to think of it that way, because it certainly would be a threat to their power. They want total control, total hegemonic control over our lives, and us to be beholden and dependent on them. So anything that does that, even if it's a peaceful sort of sedition where, we grow most of our own food, we make most of our own clothing, we provide transportation for free to one another, and we educate one another for free, on and on and on. Eventually, once they catch wind of it and it catches on enough, they're not going to like that their position is being usurped and done away with, eroded in any way. So they will probably lash back violently, which, in my opinion, is a good reason to want to get into especially local politics as well as building mutual aid networks. Because when that time comes, if you got no one on your side at the city council, they may just steamroll you, like we've seen done to Occupy Wall Street and its various offshoots, like we saw done with the CHOP / I forgot what the other name was for it, but the autonomous zone that they set up very briefly, and eventually, since you don't have any friends in local high places.
What was that?
That was my phone. Sorry, I'll move it. They got overrun. But if you at least have friendly voices, even if they can't do much from inside that power structure, which is going to be the case, like Ben brought up and like I've said, capitalism is baked into the system at every level. But at the very least, they're not going to be the ones giving the go-ahead to the police to, say, tear gas you or tear up your encampment or destroy your food distribution network, your community gardens, or whatever it is that you're doing. So it will at the very least constrain the local power quite a bit. So that's my 2 cents on that, I guess.
You just think about it from the perspective of like employers and crap. If we have stuff like universal health care, people are going to be a lot more flexible in what kind of jobs they take because they're not tethered to something, because your ability to continue being alive is tied to it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's my thought, is let's let's work at removing that boot on our neck that we have to be dependent on the system. Let's create systems of interdependence ourselves, run the way that we want to run them. So you say Marxist-Leninists tend to argue that people control worker co-ops through the state. Yeah, that definitely was the way that it was conceived of. So there's more indirect control of the means of production, because at least how Lenin phrased it in State and Revolution, he said that there should be local units of government that then elect representatives to the next unit up, so far, up the chain until you get to the national level. But that any of those elected officials could be recalled at any time by the people, so there'd be a huge control over them. They would take only workmen's wages. They wouldn't get paid anything extra, so there'd be no financial benefit, like you see with the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, to getting in that position. Now, of course, the world's a little more complicated financially since that point, so, the reason Nancy Pelosi gets rich is not because of her wages, because of her insider information. But if you're if you were to say do away with the stock market, well, then that would put that avenue out of reach for a politician as well. But anyway,
Politicians shouldn't be able to get any funding from a corporation. They should completely be dependent upon votes from citizens.
right.
Because businesses aren't people, contrary to what society's been teaching us lately.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear that no matter the system we have, if we're going to have representatives of any kind, they have to be very tightly controlled by the people themselves and prevented as much as possible from corruption and bribery and kickbacks and all these other sorts of things. Well, I think more than that, Wolf, it wasn't just that he definitely wanted a different system. Like he said, I don't think he phrased it very well, calling it I don't remember even what he called it specifically. I think a worker state rather than a bourgeois state. So that notion gets lost in the sauce a little bit. But what it seemed like ended up shaking out was that, the members of the Vanguard Party took the most important positions, and a lot of them just entrenched their power. And for better or worse, that seems to be the way it went. Not without even passing judgment on why they did what they did, because there can be plenty of external and internal reasons for making any one decision. It seems to be that that's what happened. Now, I think overall it seemed like it worked out better for the masses of people, like the Soviet Union at its height. People talk fondly about it, except for those that used to be big capitalist owners, the ones that were run out or had their stuff taken and they left. But for everyone else, it seems to be like it worked out better. They're very progressive in a lot of things. Although that seems to have eroded during Stalin's time. But we shouldn't hold up the USSR anyway as the only example of how things can go. Things have shaken out differently in different countries even since that time. Things are different in China than they are in Vietnam, than they are in Cuba, than they are in the EZLN, than they are in...
People are very one-track minded, though,
Yeah.
on that, because it's they want that shiny example of where it didn't work to be well, see, it can never work.
Right. Ignoring that most countries in the world are capitalist, and a whole hell of a lot of them are, despotic, corrupt, defunct, no real semblance of control or rule of law or any of that stuff that they hold up as tenets of capitalism. Certainly not that much innovation or profit, all that stuff. Plenty of capitalist countries that are not doing so great. Haiti comes to mind as one. As
Greece.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But Haiti is the poorest country in the world. Also a capitalist country. So it's not as though just because the U.S. exists that everyone who chooses capitalism is going to have the same result, because the U.S.'s success is really built on exploitation of people the world over for centuries now.
Right.
So there's that. Yeah, yeah, Haiti is pretty neoliberal. And like, you know, Brazil, another capitalist country, not doing so hot. It's getting better now that they've put Lula de Silva. I think that was the name. Anyway, they got Bolsonaro out. That's the important part. And a, you know, at least nominally leftist guy back into power. Yeah, North Korea, very different than all those others. It's hard for me to even know what to think about North Korea. It's been so heavily propagandized, but yeah, no matter what you say, it's definitely a different form of socialism than any of the other ones that claim the title.
It's funny how much society seems to be much more accepting of those that are far right versus those that are far left.
Hmm. What do you mean?
Just that.
Okay, can you say that again?
People are much more accepting, like society in the world or whatnot, are much more accepting of those who are far right versus
Oh,
far
sure.
left.
Society is more accepting of the
Yes.
far right. Yeah, I think a lot of that just has to do with just built-in inertia. It's the reason that conservatives never really have to come up with new ideas or anything. It's just because, you know, there's we've been propagandized our entire life, so all the heavy lifting's been done for us. They don't have to pitch a totally different system or a new way of doing things. They're just like more of the same, but less of those pesky, you know, insert group X here people.
Yeah. I
Nominally means just, you know, at least a little bit. Kind of like how Bernie Sanders is nominally leftist. He calls himself a social democrat. I believe in his heart he's even more left than that. He knows how to read a room. He knows that is not yet something that Americans can even accept. Any sort of true socialism. But you look at all his policies that he's advocated for from the beginning, it's all for the benefit of the working class. So I would say he's nominally leftist for sure. I would include him in that group. Yeah, right. So Dem sock Dem, but definitely a lot better than what they had. It's hard to advocate for Jair Bolsonaro uh, as anything but just a reactionary nut job. Yeah, so that I mean that to me that's the reason that leftists always have an uphill battle, and why leftist memes tend to be blocks of text, and lots of theory and definition of terms that are different than the way most people have defined it their entire life, is because we're fighting against the inertia of propaganda and just the way things have been. The status quo. Status quo is always hard to change. It's always going to seem scary to a lot of people. I mean, even the phrase like, you know, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, that applies to a lot of this stuff too. Like, even if people are not satisfied with where they're at in their life under capitalism, they think it's going to be worlds better than socialism because, you know, at least they know what to expect. They know to a large extent how the game is played, how the world runs under capitalism. They don't know how it would be under socialism.
or how much better it could be.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now I have to sidetrack because that's just where my brain went.
Sure.
Like with the elections coming up this week, I've gotten so many stupid ass requests for money to protect
Oh,
abortion.
right.
And every time I get one, I just block it now because it's just like, stop. Stop asking me to pay for a right that I had for 50 years and you're threatening to take away now because of your inaction.
Yeah.
Stop.
Right.
Like, I can't wait to tell you what to do with your genitals.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Right.
so fun.
Well, and that's the thing is the people that actually have a lot of power, that are rich, never suffer those consequences. They can always go to another country where it is legal. They can always
Pay to send.
they can pay some high priced, high skilled surgeon to do it in a, you know, any under the table sort of way. The rules don't apply to the rich, and they like it that way.
Which is gross. Like, why do you get to live under these separate standards?
Because, you know, they start from the premise that they are inherently better people.
No, they're not.
They I know, but I'm just telling you the premise they start from. It's I'm a better person. I deserve everything, and if the rules go against me, it's okay for me to flout them because I'm inherently a better and good person. Now, all those the scum of the earth skirting around beneath my feet, they should definitely follow the rules because, they have not proven themselves worthy to be on my level. So therefore, they don't deserve to flout the law or the rules in any way, and they'll be very hard on poor people. And whether you're putting a camp up in someone's public park because you have absolutely no other place to go, well, it's against the rules. It's against the rules. They'll always talk about legalism, what's legal and what's not, and use that as a substitute for morality when it's certainly not, and when they certainly don't even follow it themselves. Like a perfect archetypal character of the entitled capitalist is Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. He was like the perfect capitalist, utterly unfeeling, conspicuous consumption, moralized about drugs and stuff. He did drugs all the time, wanted all the poor people to have to follow the rules, but clearly didn't believe the rules applied to him. He murdered whoever he felt like. So yeah, he was like the perfect capitalist, really. Yeah, if you have money, buy your own standards, right? And sometimes they even do that. There's that documentary called The Anarchist, wildly inaccurate title. It was a bunch of wannabe ANCAPs who all just happened to be really wealthy and all just got together in Mexico to form their own ANCAPistan, basically. Which, surprise, surprise, turned out to be lots of murder and really terrible things happening there. I really wish they hadn't called it the anarchists because they are not anarchist in any sense of the word. But hey, what can you do? Can't control big entertainment, right? Anyway, excuse me. Let's get back to Ben's video and see what she has to say more. Because I like this line of reasoning, even if I don't entirely follow it myself. It's still good to hear people put it out there in a succinct and logical way.
As we just went over, you can have capital.
Oh, Ben lives in Minneapolis too, so another local, very cool creator.
I recognize that skyline.
Oh, that's right. There's the IDS tower. And that, I think that's is that the Target building that plays all the projections on it? Could be.
Capitalists inside of a socialist country. It is possible for there to be individual capitalists within a socialist country, but the state has an adversarial position against those capitalists.
Okay, so this is Ben's basic argument. She's saying that it is not possible to have capitalism in a socialist country, even if you have capitalists, because they're always working against the inertia of the worker state. Likewise, it is not possible to have socialism within a capitalist state because they're always working against the inertia and just the baked-in rules of the capitalist state, the bourgeois state is really how I like to think of it, because it really is a state of, by, and for the wealthy, and then everyone else, we may happen to get some crumbs, may happen to get some benefits ourselves, but for the most part, we will never have a fraction of the power that they possess. So, interesting argument. I like it.
The state fundamentally views those capitalists as a threat to their institutional power, as a threat to the well-being of working class people, right? Which is why socialist states will constantly scrutinize the behavior of wealthy capitalists, will do everything within its power to suppress any independent power base forming within capitalist institutions, and will do everything within its power to distribute any wealth and profits that are generated from private capital to the people, right? The reason why you all have capitalists within socialist countries is largely because of the international market system requiring a certain degree of like foreign investment and foreign development in order to grow your economy, right? Like as we mentioned, right? you have two different principles. You want workers to own the fruits of their labors, but you also want to operate on the principle of from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. But if your country is not developed to a point where you can meet everybody's needs, you have to like make sacrifices and do the calculation of what do you need to do, what does it take to get to the point where you can meet everybody's needs, right? What does that take? You know? Fundamentally, that is really, really important, isn't it? Right? Is getting to the point where you can meet everybody's needs. And because the international system of capital requires you to engage with these capital markets, it requires some countries, right? It requires some countries then to like allow some degree of capitalist development, some degree of foreign private investment in order to like develop their industrial base so that they can meet people's needs, right? Right. Well, the original concept of corporations was to amass capital to benefit society with massive expensive infrastructure. Yeah, it's true. All right. This is a good question. The local fire department put out my house for free. Is that socialism? No, that is not socialism. Right? That is a social welfare program, which is good. To be clear, social welfare programs are good, right? But a social welfare program does not make a country socialist, right? And that's what's important. Because
this I would agree with Ben as well, because socialism, and really because it's such a out there concept to so many, I think it's important to keep it simple. Socialism just means the workers own the means of production. It could take many different shapes and forms. It could be an anarchist form of socialism. It could be a communist one. It could be a state-run one where people have control over the state. It could be a more localized one where local communities have more control. It could be direct democracy. It could be representative democracy. There's a lot of ways that it can shake out. But really all that it means is a way of organizing the economy where the workers own the means of production rather than one person, the owner, privately owning it and then extracting the surplus labor value from all of the employees, taking a little bit from each employee for themselves because legally they can. That's really the only difference between capitalism and socialism. So to have a bare bones socialist state, all you have to have is the workers owning the means of production. And there being laws. I suppose you probably also have to have it baked into the system that is the only legal way to operate. So legally you cannot start a capitalist organization under a socialist state, right? So if you get to that point, you got socialism. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have all these different welfare programs. Those things can take different shapes. I think that to have a really worthwhile version of socialism, you at the very least have to provide housing, transportation, food, education, and I guess those are the big ones. You have to provide people's basic needs, right? To have any sort of socialism worthwhile, because that is liberating the most amount of people possible, so that they can live whatever sort of life they feel like from that point. And you know what? Most of them are going to choose to work a job of one kind or another, enough to support anyone who just decides or cannot work themselves for whatever reason. So I think there's no danger of it actually breaking down if we get to the point where no one has to work, where they don't have to have the constant threat of hunger and death hanging over their head in order to motivate them. Anything you'd like to add?
Sorry, you just kind of took over there, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm kind of tired.
I'm trying to bring you back in.
Sorry, I'm like exhausted.
Okay. Do you want to call it a night for yourself?
I think I may have to. Sorry, guys.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining, Amanda. Everyone say thank you to Amanda.
Bye, guys.
I'll
I'm
take that off the
tired.
screen so you can wave a proper goodbye to everybody.
I'm tired. I'm sorry.
That's
See?
right. Oh, see, yeah, your phone is reminding you that it's about time to go to bed.
Yeah, it's night time.
It's
What?
just funny that your phone has to remind you. No. It's just funny. It struck me as funny. I'm sorry. I don't know why.
I rise and fall with the sun, folks.
Yes, you
And
very
that's
much
something
do.
that Zuck has a really difficult time.
No, I'm definitely a night owl. So.
He is. I can't handle it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Anyway, thanks for joining. It's
Yeah.
nice having you on, having your opinions. You'll see more of you soon. Maybe tomorrow night.
Yeah. If we don't end up looking at more apartments, but I feel like we should just apply for the one.
Yeah, we definitely should apply for the one. So,
It's pretty great.
yeah, sounds pretty good.
I want to exercise. What?
No, I was laughing at what James said. He goes, "Go ahead, Amanda. Leave him to fend for himself."
Yeah. Do it.
All right.
He's a man. Society's already told him he can do everything anyway.
On that note, let's move on to the video here. Yeah, for sure. Oh, shoot. I
Like,
forgot to put it back on.
and the reason for that, like, the reason
Sorry, I probably, that probably was not playing. Let's back it up just a minute here.
the program does not make a country socialist, right? And that's what's important, because that's where the social democrats come in, right? You have countries like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, you name it. These social democratic countries. They are still, by definition, capitalist countries. You will notice that those countries, the policies within them, largely reflect the will of capital interests. They largely reflect the will of capitalist interests. But because of a combination of factors, right, both historical and material, it is beneficial for those countries, those capitalist countries, to create a certain amount of social safety nets in order to prevent any type of like revolutionary opposition to them.
Yes, that's a very good point too. And if you look into the history of how the New Deal got to be a thing, it was in direct response to the pressure that was being put on the country by socialist movements. Various socialist movements were pushing harder and harder. It wasn't good enough anymore just to have unions. They wanted to enact basically full socialism, and this had the capitalists very worried, and so they basically threw them a bone. They're like, okay, well, we'll create all these worker programs, the WPA. We'll put people back to work. We'll get us out of the depression, so on and so forth. And because of that, that appeased people enough that it severely weakened the socialist movement. Well, basically from that point on, up until the present day, when we're finally seeing a resurgence again of labor movements and socialist ideas not being so taboo that they're not even able to be talked about. But basically from the time of FDR, because of that compromise, unions were strengthened quite a bit, and that continued on until around the 70s, when it started to become more and more eroded. Kind of the death knell to the worker movement in America was the squashing of the I think it was the Air Traffic Controllers Union by Ronald Reagan, and then Reaganomics have taken over since that point up until basically the present. So even though the will of the people has shifted back towards a more socialistic view, the policies are not reflected in that at all, really. Like, I mean, we got the Affordable Care Act instead of even socialized medicine. So that's all to say that yeah, what Ben is saying here is very true, that if you throw labor enough bones, it takes the wind out of their sails towards pushing past capitalism altogether, or it can. I don't think it's necessarily the end of history in that. Like there's no end of history. So just because it has worked for the past, however many decades doesn't mean that it will always continue to work, especially as we move further and further from the time of the Red Scare, the original Red Scare, when anti-communist feelings were at their height, to a point where information about various forms of socialism cannot really be repressed anymore. Uh, I don't think it necessarily has to be that, the idea of creating a social safety net is just going to be this hammock that people get comfortable in and never really push for anything more, even if that's been the case up till now.
Right? Like, and the reason for that, like, the reason for the difference between, like, Europe and the United States, for example, is the hegemonic culture. So, in the United States, capitalism was always the name of the game, right? The United States literally committed mass genocide to erase any cultural history of the United States, which they failed at, right? The good news is we still, have indigenous people living their best life in the United States. Unfortunately, though, they are still, like, brutally oppressed and still subject to, like, genocidal policies from the United States. But indigenous people are still very, very much here fighting for their rights and sovereignty, right? But in the United States territory that was stolen by these white colonial settlers, they didn't have a history of feudalism, right? There was no history of feudalism in the United States, and there was a history of feudalism.
I gotta take a bone of contention with that one. If we're talking about just the United States, maybe. I guess I don't know individual histories of every single tribe. But if we're expanding that to North America, well, then there certainly was a history of feudalism. That's what the Aztec Empire was. So, and even to a much lesser extent, some of the ones that came before them. And let's see, I think the Mayas were in Mesoamerica, so that still could count as North America. The Mayans, not the Mayas. Let me just fact check that. Yeah, Mesoamerican civilization. That was also a feudalist existence. So, I mean, even if you're confining your statement to the United States, that might be true. Yeah, I guess you can't really say there was a history of capitalism either that I'm aware of, because it seemed like pretty much every peoples that the Westerners encountered thought it was very strange for one person to have absolute control over the means of subsistence. So what Ben is alluding to, though, is this idea of primitive communism. The idea that when we were all bands and tribes, things were... Oops, I pressed the wrong button there. Things were more... Oh, ads. All right, great. Well, that's okay. We won't start the video till James is back with us. And then any other of you who are seeing the ads now, too. Sorry, didn't mean to stop sharing that. Anyway, this idea of primitive communism, which... I think there's some merits in looking at things that way. There's definitely some lessons to be learned about the organization of things pre-colonialization. But to say that it was analogous to communism or socialism, I don't know that that's necessarily true. It's not that it's better or worse by any means. It's just because we have such large-scale civilization full of so many people who are otherwise strangers to each other, just happen to share same nationality, just the context is different. So useful to look at these things, useful to show that there is no one way to organize society. There's no one way that society has to come and go. This was demonstrated pretty well in David Graeber's The Dawn of Everything book, where he looked at all sorts of different civilizations. Some followed that chain of going from, as all anthropologists used to think it went, from bands to tribes to chiefdoms to feudalism, and would have just continued on to capitalism and larger city states, and then on to nation states and stuff like that, with more and more centralized control. In fact, there were some that got to the point of feudalism and then went backwards and became more egalitarian, or backwards, so to speak. Yeah. Sorry about that, James. Although I think I mentioned it before, but I finally did get my first ad check from Twitch. So thanks for watching the ads. I do appreciate it. It does actually make a difference to me. Anyway, so there were civilizations like the Olmecs who reached a point of control and massive hierarchical differences, and then went in a different route towards more egalitarian styles of living, but died out before they could really be observed by historians, I guess. So it's harder to piece together exactly how that civilization functioned, but from all available evidence, it looked like everyone in the society basically lived in large houses. There was no central exalted places for priests or rulers of any kind, and it seemed like things were pretty good for everybody involved. So there's a counterexample. Some nations were more hierarchical, and then nations next door to them, to distinguish themselves, would become less hierarchical, more egalitarian. So there's all sorts of different things going on. There's no one inevitable course. Even the idea that you have to go from hunter-gatherer to an agrarian society was called into question with that book, and I think argued pretty persuasively that no, there were large civilizations that were still largely nomadic, hunter-gatherer, seasonal, with different rules for different seasons. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool book anyway. David Graeber's The Dawn of Everything. Highly recommend it. But anyway, getting a little bit far afield from what Ben is talking about here, so let's continue.
In Europe. Now, why does that make a difference today? Why does that make a difference? Well, because under feudalism, there were these things that were known as the poor laws, right? They were known as the poor laws in the British Isles, but in other places they had different names. But basically, after hundreds of years of like this feudal system, and, peasant revolts and peasant movements and things like that, kings got really tired of peasant revolts. They got really tired of them. So kings would go to the feudal lords and say, you must guarantee these people housing, you must guarantee these people food, right? So that they stop revolting against you, okay? You need to give these people holidays, you need to give these people, right, all of these different perks so they stop revolting against you, because it's exhausting to have to replace my feudal lords whenever the peasants kill one of you.
So basically what Ben is arguing for here is the idea of the bread and circuses. The idea that the Romans, in order to keep their population appeased, which worked for quite some time, would just give them stuff for free. Free food, free entertainment. It kept them from... It kept conditions from getting so bad for so many people that they would ever think of rising up and revolting. And it worked for, I don't know how many hundreds of years they did it, but it worked for hundreds of years. Kept the Roman Empire together until it didn't. Not to say that peasant revolt was necessarily the main downfall of the Romans, but still, this is what Ben is arguing, is that these services, these social services, are amount to bread and circuses. They're just the bare minimum to keep your people living just well enough that they don't consider revolting. So it's persuasive argument. I still think it's good to have social safety nets and social services, even if it would probably be better if we just provided as much of that as we could in our local communities, away from the control of the capitalist governments. But anyway,
right? And so that's what they got that in those European countries. They got those things, right? And so when they made the shift to industrial capitalism, they had these labor movements and they had all of these things that made a huge difference, that were able to organize and make these demands. And so their shift to industrial capitalism was met by a powerful labor force that was pushing towards socialism, and the compromise was social democracy. We'll keep the system of capitalism in place. Landlords and business owners will still have power over you, the workers. Your relationship is not fundamentally changed, but we'll at least give you a little bit of a safety net so that you're not, like, you know, starving in the streets or whatever. Or at least most of you aren't starving in the streets. The United States had a different history, because what happened to the labor movement in the United States? Whenever there were labor movements in the United States, what happened to them, chat? Yeah, they were crushed.
Viciously repressed.
It turns out that the
yes.
United States, because it had a long history of slavery, right?
And in fact, I would love to take a look at there were some very successful general strikes in and around the period just leading up to, like, the New Deal era, where capitalists were so afraid that the people were finally taking control that they brought in, like, the army to brutally crush, kill, and repress the movements, because it was that effective. I'd love to learn more about that, because I only know just kind of the basic overview history of that. So maybe we'll take a look at that sometime.
Had a long history of slavery. There were tons of vigilante militias that were ready to kill anybody that disagreed with them. That they were willing to kill anybody that was a threat to their profits, right? This was something that was actively incentivized by the United States, was this murderous regime, right? There was never a regime as more murderous than the United States of America. Never was there a country with such a brutal history as the United States of America. That we had so many vigilante warriors. We had so many lynch mobs. We had
I have not read Strike by Jeremy Breacher. Yeah, cool. I'll have to look that up. Thanks for the suggestion. Oops. Why did it do that? I didn't tell it. Keeps doing the button that I'm not trying to press. Sorry. Bringing it back. Here we go.
so many like slave catcher squadrons across the country that after slavery ended and with the shift towards industrial capitalism, as labor movements started to surge in the United States, they were killed. They were just straight up murdered, right? They were dragged into jail, right? They were executed. Cities were bombed, right? Entire cities were bombed by the United States government, right? To prevent these labor movements from organizing. And so that's why the United States has a more brutal form of capitalism within the United States. Now, the United States did do something similar to these European countries, sort of, where the United States' solution to this, eventually, right, following the FDR administration, was to create its own sort of like social democracy. But it was like basically an apartheid social democracy, where they quite literally demolished and
Another good point too. The New Deal was not all it was cracked up to be for people of color, especially black people, who often were denied a lot of the same programs that white people were given. I think the WPA was quite discriminatory. Same thing happened with the GI Bill. Most black soldiers were denied participation in that program as well. Denied housing, denied scholarships for college. So, yeah, good point.
and bombed black neighborhoods with the sole purpose of establishing white suburbs, right? The creation of white suburbs was effectively this compromise that would create, in a sense, local feudal peasantry systems where you have an entire suburb built around just one or two factories so that the factory owner could basically dictate the terms of that city's policies in those white suburbs. While also at the same time packing black and brown folks into the cities, right? So that they could be gerrymandered away and basically all of their potential votes are ignored, while criminalizing the existence of black folks, throwing them in jail for the purpose of taking away their right to vote. And basically, there's tons of perks and privileges that were set up, like, you know, home loan programs and different housing development programs and other rural development programs that were specifically designed to subsidize the existence of white neighborhoods and to extract wealth from black neighborhoods. And so basically it's a form of internal colonialism that the United States to this very day engages in. you'll notice that suburbs are not solvent. And so suburbs depend on huge amounts of economic production from the cities that is then stripped away and handed over to wealthy white suburbs, right? And so fundamentally,
They do which part, James? The gerrymandering? Absolutely. This is becoming an epidemic problem at this point, especially when it comes to things like school funding. This is a legal way to racially discriminate. You just make your white wealthy suburb its own little school district, and make sure that all of the poorer and consequently more non-white districts put them all together in their own block. Because in the US, which is really ridiculous that we can get away with this when we have the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, somehow we still do it, though, where you can give disproportionate funding based on property taxes for a school district. Now, if we were to follow the 14th clause, let's bring up the language of the 14th Amendment here. Equal Protection Clause, we'll bring it up. Equal Protection Clause. All right, we will share that briefly here. Let's see. No state shall make or enforce a law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall the state deprive any persons of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. It's hard to see how you could have that in the amendment and still get away with disproportionately funding schools. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that which title was it? Title IX or something was what finally made it so schools had to give funding and equal. I don't know if it's equal funding or at least pretty, at least fund in some capacity girls and women's sports because of the equal protection. I think that was all because of the Equal Protection Clause. How you can then fund entire schools differently based on residency and affluence of the local people doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. At the very least, I mean, really what should be done if we're going to fund schools by property tax is it should be taken out at whatever level it gets taken out, put into a national pool, and if not a national pool, at the very least a state pool of all the funds for all the different districts, and then redistributed evenly across the nation per pupil, on a per pupil basis. And you may need to make corrections for extra accommodations. I think that is a fair way of having different funding systems, because people with special needs need special accommodations. It's okay then to fund them more, because to have equal protection, they have to be on a level playing field with all of their peers. So anyway, that's all a long way of saying that the way that we fund schools is completely racist, even though, as Ben Shapiro is very quick to point out, well, you don't have any actual racial language in the actual laws and bills that are controlling the way that schools are funded. It doesn't matter. The effect is obvious. The intent is obvious. I mean, you look at some of these really odd-shaped districts, it's pretty clear what's going on. It's a pretty one-to-one overlay between racial makeup of that district and a different racial makeup for all the surrounding districts. So, anyway. I don't even remember why we got on that tangent, but we will get back to the regular video now. But yeah, don't let anyone say that there's no racist laws in America. Racism is over, because it's not explicit. That's not how that works. If the effect is to constantly have racist outcomes, then it doesn't even matter if there are racist people with racist intent in their heart. It just matters that the effect is the same as if there was. So it's still a racist system. That's how a system specifically can be racist, even if it does not contain racist individuals. If it is being faithful to the way it has been set to run, then it is a racist system. If it is producing racially disparate outcomes.
The United States has this basically project, this colonial project operating within it, where there are basically colonized areas of the United States, and then there are areas that are the beneficiary of that colonialization, where they take in the wealth.
Yeah.
And this is pretty clear, especially like, you know, if you want to see this in the most extreme form, look towards reservations, right? Look towards reservations, where quite literally indigenous people have all of their like natural resources stolen from them, all right? All of their natural resources stolen from them with great regularity, right? Are literally forced into poverty because chat, right? Who decides the governing structure of like tribal authorities, right? These sovereign nations, right, by the way. Sovereign nations, right, of indigenous people within the United States. Who dictates the terms of their structures of governance? Who dictates the terms? The Bureau of Indian Affairs,
Yep.
which is a federal administration,
Federal
the
program.
federal government, right? So the federal government dictates the terms of governance for indigenous people who are supposed to be sovereign nations. They're literally not even allowed their own systems of governance, right? So it quite literally it's literally one for one exactly like the colonial systems that like Great Britain would use, where they would like basically say, this is what your government is now, and that government fundamentally serves the interests of the wealthy, right? And the government fundamentally like basically leaves a lot of indigenous folks colonized, right? Quite literally colonized, where their land has been stolen, their natural resources have been stolen,
The White House.
and they're chronically underfunded and forced into poverty, and they're not even allowed to dictate the terms of their own governance, right? And so, like, fundamentally, every time you vote, yeah, exactly, literally, Wasigan, because it's like fundamentally the Democrats and Republicans both agree on this extraction, both agree on this violation of it, like, you know, indigenous sovereignty, all right? And so, like, you know, like, these are the things that are really important, right? These are really important. Could you please name any other city, bomb cities other than Tulsa? Yeah, there was a bombing in Boston that they did, where they took out like a block or two. There were some bombs that went off in Chicago as a result of like the Pullman strike. Then there was the shelling that they did on the coal miners in West Virginia.
It's funny, I was just about to look that up. Yeah, that was one of the biggest ones. I think had it not been for Tulsa, it would have been the biggest incident of bombing, of the U.S. bombing its own citizens in history. And then, of course, there's the move bombing later in the timeline, where the U.S. literally dropped a bomb on a building of activists and ended up burning down something like 16 square blocks of, I think it was Chicago. Let me look up that one. Philadelphia, my mistake. 1985 move bombing in Philadelphia. Oh, I don't really want to link you to a Vox article or a New Yorker. Let's look up something a little bit more on our side. Well, there's a good podcast about it. Let's see if I can find that. Oh yeah, stuff you should know. I think they had a pretty good treatment of it, as I recall. So, check this out: the bombing of the Move organization in Philly. Thank you, Takerna. Yeah, Pretty horrible. Pretty horrible. A lot of people burned to death in that house, including children of the members of Move, just because people didn't like them. Basically, basically that was it. They came up with a pretense for raiding their house. It was a big armed standoff. They ended up thinking, well, the best way to get them out, they just wanted to get it over quickly. And so they decided, well, we'll drop a firebomb. And if their house catches on fire, well, surely they'll get out, not realizing that they had barricaded themselves inside. And it was not easy for them to get out once the fire started. And like I say, a number of them burned to death. And then their house caught fire, or their house fire spread to the next houses. And eventually it was something like 16 square blocks in Philly were burned down. Because of the police. The police did it.
Not to mention, of course, like, obviously the mass murder and slaughter of indigenous people and the black folks that, like, had escaped slavery into, like, sovereign land and things like that.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that in the last episode of People's History. Oh, shoot. I want to say it's was it the Creek or the Seminoles? Jeez, I can't remember now. Oh, I feel terrible. Anyway, it was a Florida group of natives who fought against the U.S. and successfully waged guerrilla warfare for a number of years until they were just completely worn down by the massive supply lines and firepower of U.S. troops.
Philadelphia in 85. That's right. I'm trying to think of a couple of others. Rosewood. Yeah.
Oh, Rosewood. That sounds...
I think it's messed up how they can turn off your water at your house. That should be illegal. 100%, Rocket.
Absolutely.
100%.
Should be able to deprive you of life.
Yeah, the United States was an incredibly brutal, murderous regime that killed labor organizers, killed black folks, indigenous folks, right? Even women, right? Even white women, right? Were like illegally institutionalized. So you have to remember, one of the responses to the suffragette movement was to create a system where abortion was illegal, and to create a system of asylums so that women could be arbitrarily deemed insane by men in their family, and institutionalized to prevent them from organizing, right? Like, that's fundamentally, that's why those laws were put in place, right? Was to make it easier to suppress women organizing for the right to vote. So yeah, there's plenty of places that they had bombed, right? Because it was either black people accumulating wealth, or labor organizers. Let's see, because I explained the difference between the social democracy. Oh yeah, so you can't have a blend. All of that is to say that you can't have a blend. There's no such thing as a blend of socialism and capitalism, right?
In terms of state organization, I agree. I think Ben is 100% spot on. You cannot have a mixed... I think she probably would have been better to phrase it as you cannot have a blend of governments when it comes to socialism and capitalism. It is either a socialist government or a capitalist government, because I think that's definitely true. You can have individual businesses that are organized differently, and I would still call a worker-owned and directed cooperative socialist, even though they're operating within the waters of capitalism and by their rules, and still probably dependent on products and services from other capitalist businesses and the exploitation of labor around the world. But still, the workers are owning the means of production. I would call that business socialist, regardless of what system it finds itself in. I suppose Ben could have even said you can't have a capitalist society and socialist society blended together. Society is either capitalist or it is socialist. That it is kind of what is baked into the background, baked into people's consciences, whatever. I don't know even what word I'm trying to say anymore. It is baked into the rules. So yeah, I would agree. It's either a socialist state or a capitalist state, even at the micro level. James says we have an old asylum in West Virginia. Sad to say, they put women and children in it for anything. Oh, I mean, they still commit terrible atrocities against women in all over the place. I remember when barely even got news coverage, but at least I don't recall it getting much news coverage outside of the left. But they, when they were doing the main thrust of the capturing and detaining immigrants under the Trump administration, they were giving women hysterectomies against their will. That is a form of genocide. That is against the Geneva Convention. That is against the rules of even warfare. You cannot deprive people of the ability to reproduce against their will. And that's something we were just doing as a matter of policy. But because they were immigrants and thought of as having no rights or legal status at all, it was basically swept under the rug. You certainly don't hear anyone talk about it anymore. So who knows? They may even still have policies like that. Biden just adopted a lot of Trump's immigration policies. He's not really all that much better. He certainly didn't send down a bunch of immigration judges to work through all the cases of asylum seekers in a timely fashion, give people their due process for trying to become U.S. citizens after fleeing treacherous, life-threatening situations in their home countries. So, I mean, at best, he's just returning to an old, slightly less brutal version of the status quo. But he's certainly not helping the situation. But I'll let Ben finish up her video here.
It's not a real thing that exists, right?
Yeah.
And no, your fire department is not socialist. It's a social program, right, which is good, right? It's a social safety net. That is good. But the fire department is not socialist, right?
Right.
It's not socialist.
I agree. All right. Ooh.
Welcome back, everybody.
Well,
Feels so good to be back.
hold on.
Never been.
Ugh. I follow Caleb Maupin just because I find him fascinating, so that's why he popped up there. But, oh my goodness, has he had a falling off even from his pretty shaky position before as a supposed leftist and communist. What a gross guy. Just utterly taking advantage, sexual exploitation of women. A really gross guy. Allegedly. I guess he's not gone to trial for it or anything, but sounds pretty compelling, what's been said about him. So, if you have anybody in your life who still likes to follow Caleb Maupin, reach out to them. See if they're okay. Because, yikes. Dudes could be checked out, women and children only be checked out by the husband. Oh, yeah. Yeah, lots of terrible immigration policies that I'm sure are still largely in place. There's a lot of truth to the idea that it doesn't matter which of the two bourgeois parties you vote for, that you get one that's going to give you lip service towards good change and the other that's not even going to bother with that. Oh, no. No. I mean, I subscribe to his channel. I check on what he's saying from time to time. I don't follow him. I'm not a follower of Maupin by any means. No. I never really was. I don't understand his appeal. I don't understand how he's just so bland and like I mean he talks about communism all the time, but he only seems to be able to define it in terms of like, well, we'll create abundance. Like I don't even know that he understands. Like he's done so much reading, he's read so much theory, but he doesn't seem to have a good grasp of what communism even is. He's just a very strange, sad individual. So, but you're right, James. As we have been seeing with the People's History of the United States, which be doing another episode of that tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Probably 7. Make that 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Continuing on, I think we're on to chapter 8 this week. So yeah, but you're right. America has always been racist and sexist and, patriarchal, believing in manifest destiny. A lot of really terrible things have always been baked into the soul of the American country. Largely in its rulers, but still. All right, I think that's probably going to do it for me tonight. We're getting close to the 9 o'clock hour, so it's too late to start anything new. If there's anyone that you'd like me to raid into, go ahead and shout it out. But get that in there quickly, because otherwise I'm just going to pick somebody. Oh, not even on anymore. Okay, let me refresh to see who's on still. Let's see. So we have Jet Extremis, always an option to raid into, and also Bread Crochets. We could try him again. Who else is on at this point? Try doing Chapo Trap House. They might just be doing shoot the shit kind of stuff. I don't know. But any suggestions are welcome. Bread Crochets? Okay. Wrathbone. Oh, I don't know Wrathbone. I'll have to check them out sometime. But yeah, let's do Bread Crochets tonight. It didn't work last time. I don't know if there was just something wrong with my connection to Twitch at the time or what, but we're going to try. We're going to give it our best. Let's see. Thank you all for joining. Join me tomorrow night for more People's History of the United States. And yeah, see you then. Here goes. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I keep hitting the wrong button. My goodness. Let's try raiding Bread Crochets first. Is it going to work? Yes, it does work this time. Thank goodness. Thank you all. Have a great night.